lonely heart. Sekhar was chasing butterflies one afternoon in his uncle's garden when he heard the tinkle of the postman's bicycle. There was a letter for his uncle, which Sekhar promised to forward to him when he returned from office. The postman smiled at him.
"What's your name, son?"
he asked. "Sekhar."
"How are you related to Mr. Basu?"
The postman leaned on his bicycle. "I am his nephew. He is my mother's brother," Sekhar replied. "I have come to spend my summer holidays here with my uncle and aunt," he added. Suddenly, Sekhar's attention was diverted by a movement in the opposite house. An old lady had come out on the balcony and stood there staring at the postman. After some time, the door opened and out came the old lady. She checked the letterbox, but there was nothing, and disappointment was writ large on her face. Slowly she closed the letterbox and went back into the house. Sekhar watched the lady silently and then turned to the postman. "Tell me something. In the last few days that I have been here, I have seen the lady in the opposite house check the letterbox eagerly every day without fail, but go back disappointed. Why is it so? Is there an important piece of news she is waiting for?" The postman smiled sadly, but shook his head.
"Didi is a very lonely person. The act of checking the letterbox in the afternoon is a habit she has indulged in over the last few years. No letter has ever come her way, for there is no one in the world to write to her."
Saying this, the postman moved on to the next house. "Who is Didi, auntie?" Sekhar asked his aunt that evening. They were sitting at the dining table with Wolf, the spaniel, at Sekhar's feet, waiting for the occasional flick from Sekhar's plate. "She lives in the opposite house," Aunt replied. "Her actual name is Jaya Sen, but she is universally known as Didi. Why do you ask about her, Sekhar?" "Auntie, I see her every day in the afternoon, checking her letterbox. The postman says that for years she has been doing it, and there is nobody who writes to her. Is it true that she has no relations in this world, uncle?" Sekhar nibbled at his food.
"Yes, it is true,"
Uncle said, with a far-away look in his eyes.
"Didi taught at the primary school near the station till her retirement. She's an extremely witty and intelligent person."
Sekhar could not sleep that night. He looked out of the window at Didi's house and wondered if she would welcome his friendship. He thought of a plan. The next day, Sekhar decided to give his plan a try. The house was silent. The only sound to be heard was the buzz of a fly on the window pane. Sekhar put Wolf on a leash, pocketed a ball, and quietly tiptoed out of the house. His uncle was in the office, and his aunt was enjoying her afternoon nap. Stealthily, Sekhar crossed the road and opened the gate of the opposite house. He threw the ball he was carrying in his pocket towards the rear end of the house, waited for some time, and then rang the bell. Didi instantly opened the door and stared at Sekhar and Wolf. "I am Mr. Basu's nephew," Sekhar said politely. "Yes, I recognize you. I have seen you often playing in the garden of the opposite house. What is it that you want?" Didi asked. "I have lost my ball in your garden." Sekhar pretended to look worried. "Can I search for it?" Didi looked at Sekhar for a second and then smiled and nodded her head. before following Shekhar to the rear end of her garden. The mango and guava trees were laden with fruits. The garden was well maintained, and there was no sign of weeds anywhere. Shekhar knew where his ball was, but he lingered purposely in front of the vegetable patch in Didi's garden.
"What a well-maintained garden!"
he exclaimed.
"You must be working hard to keep it clean."
Didi smiled. She seemed pleased. "No, I have a gardener called Badal, who comes twice a week to work in the garden." Shekhar found the ball, thanked Didi, and was leaving with Wolf when he suddenly remembered he was feeling thirsty. Didi invited Shekhar up for a glass of water, while Wolf waited near the gate. Shekhar ascended the stairs to Didi's room. The room was neat and tidy. There was a bed and a chair. But at first glance, what attracted his eyes was the shelf studded with books. While Didi went inside to get him water, Shekhar studied the titles of the books. One book that caught his fancy was The Selfish Giant by Oscar Wilde. He turned to her and asked,
"Do you mind if I borrow this book?"
Didi smiled and said, "Of course not. Take good care of it while reading." Shekhar happily agreed. While leaving, his eyes suddenly caught sight of a guitar standing against the wall, covered with dust.
"Do you know how to play a guitar? Will you teach me how to play it? I have been wanting to learn it."
Shekhar clapped his hands with joy. He had been pestering his father to let him take guitar lessons. Didi smiled at his enthusiasm. "I have not played for ages, but for you, I will play and teach you too." Each afternoon after this, Shekhar would slip out of the house to go to Didi's place. Didi would eagerly wait for him, and they would discuss about everything from gardening to books. Sometimes they would play games like word-making and Chinese crackers. Didi tried to teach Shekhar how to play the guitar unsuccessfully. Her fingers trembled due to age and lack of practice. One day, Didi invited Shekhar for tea and treated him to a big bite of a delicious chocolate cake, baked specially for him. While Didi bustled about with the cups and saucers, Shekhar laid the table with a tablecloth that Didi had stitched when she was young. The days passed quickly, and soon it was time for Shekhar to leave. He knew his uncle and aunt were going to miss him. But most of all, Didi was going to miss him terribly. But he was coming back for his winter holidays to his uncle and aunt, and of course to Didi. The train left the confines of the small station. Shekhar rested the guitar on the opposite seat. His uncle, sitting next to him, smiled. It was Didi's parting gift to him. A postman cycled past on his bicycle. The train gathered speed. Shekhar thought of the postman, the empty letterbox, and Didi's eager eyes. Shekhar sighed contentedly to himself, for he knew that the letterbox was no longer going to be empty, and that Didi would soon receive a letter, the first in many years.